Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in this morning. My pleasure to return to the broadcast this Monday morning, and we'll continue with our reading and discussion of the newsletter from Daryl Eberhardt, entitled The JFK Assassination, True History, Part 12. And you may find this newsletter on Daryl Eberhardt's website at www.toughissues.org. That's toughissues.org, toughissues.org. And you can download and print this newsletter, read it and study it and research it for yourself. And that's the purpose of this newsletter, to provoke interest in research of the Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order. And Daryl says you may download and print and distribute it at free of charge, and highly recommend that the American people get the information needed to uncover what really ails this country and who really killed JFK. Now, as Daryl Eberhardt is wont to do, he's very thorough and scholarly in his research. He presents the evidence and information in a scholarly way, and before he makes his assertion, he defines all of his terms. And we were in the process of defining the terms of this newsletter as we ended the program Friday, and we'll continue now with Daryl's definitions. Next, he defines international banksters. Who are the international banksters? We hear people talking all the time about the international banksters, and invariably the subject comes up of the Jews being the rulers of the financial world, and that there is a Jewish conspiracy to overthrow the world, and the use of these Jewish banksters to do it. That's what we're supposed to believe. That's the evidence that is put out front. And the purpose of this is to deceive the whole world as to who really is behind the financial world of this, the financial world, and that is the Rothschild banking dynasty, Jewish Freemasons, but who are listed in the Encyclopedia Judaica as the guardians of the Vatican treasury. Remember, there was a certain sect of Jews that said, at the time of the crucifixion of Christ, we have no king but Caesar. Well, there are still many Jews today who have no king but Caesar, and Caesar is the Pope today. Now, the definition, Daryl's definition of international banksters. This is key to our understanding. International banksters, says Daryl Eberhardt, is an expression that I use to describe the Jesuit-controlled financial cabal that controls the leaders and the governments of many nations on this planet. Some people allege that, quote-unquote, the Jews run international banking. However, my research has shown me that Jesuit-controlled papal Rome, that is, the Jesuit-controlled Roman Catholic Church state, is by far the number one financial entity in the world. Jesuit-controlled papal Rome rules the financial world through the Vatican's banking and financial interests in Rome, throughout Europe, and in the United States, through the wealthy Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta order, and through many of their other Jesuit-controlled financial subgroups. As Dr. Stanley Monteith says on page 59 of his book, Brotherhood of Darkness, published in 2000, he tells us, quote, some sincere people believe that the Jews or the Jewish bankers are behind the world conspiracy. There are many clues that lead people to that conclusion, but I can assure you that the evidence has been planted to divert attention away from the truth. Close quotes. That's the end of Dr. Monteith's quote. Now, instead, says Daryl Eberhardt, or indeed, Some folks like to point to the Rothschild banking dynasty as proof that the Jews run international banking. However, one of the titles of the Rothschilds, according to F. Tupper Saucy in his book, Rulers of Evil, and you may look this up on page 160 of the book if you have a copy of it. In that book, on page 160, F. Tupper Saucy gives us that the Rothschilds are the guardians of the Vatican treasury. That's what says F. Tupper Saucy in his book, Rulers of Evil, citing the Encyclopedia Judaica as his source. So they are listed in the Jewish Encyclopedia as the guardians of the Vatican treasury. These Jewish bankers, known as the Rothschilds, a private European agency handling Vatican money throughout the world, those who own the Federal Reserve System, which isn't federal at all, it's Roman. It's controlled by these Orthodox Jews, the Rothschilds, and they're the Pope's bankers. Now, you would think it very credible if the Jewish Encyclopedia listed the Rothschilds as the guardians of the Vatican treasury. So your Jewish financial world cabal automatically turns into a Vatican-controlled financial institution. And that's exactly the assertion that we make here at First Amendment Radio and Inquisition Update, and also Daryl Eberhardt and so many other thorough researchers into this subject. He continues, he says, some folks would argue that the Rothschilds should be labeled as court Jews or Jesuit-controlled, the court Jews of the Jesuit-controlled papal Rome, and that's exactly the assertion we make here. Now, some would also argue that the Knights Templar Order was the first international banking cabal. It is worth noting that when the Knights Templar Order was suppressed, as it was officially dissolved by Pope Clement V in 1312 AD, the Knights of Malta, a Roman Catholic religious military order controlled today by the Jesuit order, absorbed some of the great wealth of the Knights Templar. According to Eric John Phelps, researcher into these matters and author of the book Vatican Assassins Wounded in the House of My Friends, many of the world's richest bankers have been Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. Now, Jesuit-controlled international bankers have fomented or orchestrated and helped to finance many of the revolutions and wars of the last 3 or 4 centuries, including 2 world wars, and have profited nicely from the maiming and murder of millions of people. Now, the author, Daryl Eberhardt, is going to define the Jesuit order. This is very important information. The Jesuit order was founded in 1534 by Ignatius Loyola and was officially approved as a religious order of the Roman Catholic Church by Pope Paul III in 1540. The primary goals, and this is important, the primary goals of this Roman Catholic order, the Jesuit order, are number 1, to roll back the Protestant Reformation and the freedoms that the Protestant Reformation brought to many of the inhabitants of this planet. Number 2, to enhance the power and the prestige of the papacy as the White Pope, as he is known. And number 3, to rule despotically over the governments of the world through the papacy. The head of the Jesuit order is the Superior General, also known as the Black Pope, the real power behind the papal throne. The Jesuit Superior General is also the master of all of these. Number 1, his Jesuit order. Number 2, the Knights of Malta. And number 3, the highest levels of the Knights of Columbus. And number 4, the highest levels of Opus Dei. And number 5, the highest levels of Freemasonry. Freemasonry. Did you know that Freemasonry serves the papacy? secret societies are secretly controlled by the Jesuit order. And all these subgroups the Jesuit general controls through these powerful and influential organizations. The Jesuit order is infamous for fomenting revolutions and wars, assassinating heads of state, poisoning to death, for example, Mexican President Benito Pablo Juarez in 1872, and subverting nations. I believe that it is almost impossible, says Daryl Eberhardt, to understand European history and church history of the past 4.5 centuries without a good understanding of the Protestant Reformation and the Jesuit-led Counter-Reformation. Jesuits and other Roman Catholic priests were prominent in Marxist liberal theology movements in Latin America. All roads lead to Rome. All fingers point to Rome. Now, Daryl now is going to define the Knights of Malta that have been repeatedly referred to in this newsletter. What are the Knights of Malta? The Knights of Malta are the Jesuit-controlled by the Jesuit general, and the Knights of Malta is a Roman Catholic religious military order headquartered in Rome, which under the command of the Superior General of the Jesuits, and it's as much of the wealth of the Knights Templar order when it was suppressed in 1312 was given to the Knights of Malta. So it's a very rich and powerful organization, a secret society subservient to the Vatican through the Black Pope. And it says, according to author and researcher Eric John Phelps, many Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta have top-level positions in various governments in the world's top intelligence agencies. Very key information there. They are in control of the world's top intelligence agencies, in international banking, as we've already alluded to, and in the publishing world. In other words, they control the press and education. And a number of Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta continue to hold such positions today. According to Eric John Phelps, these following heads of the Central Intelligence Agency were all Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. William Donovan, head of the OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA. Alan Dulles, who was not only a Knight of Malta, but also a high-level Freemason. John McCone, William Casey, William Colby, George J. Tenet, and Leon Panetta. Also, according to Phelps, several Knights of Malta were involved in planning and helping to orchestrate the JFK assassination and/or were guilty of participating in the massive cover-up that followed in the wake of that assassination. Interesting. The Knights of Malta. Warriors for the papacy. They do the Pope's bidding in this country, and they run the highest one of the most powerful organizations in this country, the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. If you're a regular listener to Inquisition Update, you hear me refer to the CIA often as Catholics in Action. Now, the author, Daryl Eberhardt, is going to define the meeting at Murchison's mansion. A private meeting took place at the mansion of wealthy oil baron Clinton Murchison Sr. on November 21st, 1963, the day before JFK was assassinated in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Murchison hosted a party at his mansion that night, and some of the important men who were there separated themselves from the rest of the groups so that they could attend a private meeting to review their plans for assassinating President Kennedy. According to author Robert Galen Ross, Sr., some of the men who attended this private meeting were Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson, John J. McCloy, who co-founded the CIA, J. Edgar Hoover, FBI Director, who was, we'll add, a Shriner Freemason, Earl Cabell, mayor of Dallas, Texas, whose brother was former CIA official Charles P. Cabell, and Carlos Marcello, a mafia boss of New Orleans, Joe Savello, a mafia boss of Dallas, Jack Ruby, the mid-level mobster who later murdered Lee Harvey Oswald, and Dallas County Sheriff Bill Decker. Quite a meeting they had at Murchison's mansion. Quite a delegation of Roman Catholics, Knights of Malta, Freemasons, all concerned about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The cards are all pointing to the very real possibility, and I assert the fact that the Vatican was behind the assassination of the first Roman Catholic president of this country, John F. Kennedy. Now the author's going to define Clay Shaw. If you've never heard about Clay Shaw, his real name was Clay Bertrand, and Clay Shaw was born in 1913. He died in 1974. Shaw, whom author Eric John Phelps identifies as a Knight of Malta, was the first person to be tried as a conspirator in the JFK assassination. New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison, who brought Shaw to trial, stated that Shaw was tied to the CIA. Both Shaw and the CIA denied this. However, Richard Helms, who was CIA Director of Covert Operations in 1963, admitted in 1974 under oath that Shaw had indeed worked for the CIA. Clay Shaw was the director of New Orleans Trade Mart at the time of the trial and had connections with David Ferry and Lee Harvey Oswald, both of whom had connections to the intelligence community. He also had connections to others involved in the JFK assassination, such as Guy Bannister, a former FBI agent with connections to the intelligence community. Shaw reportedly died of lung cancer in 1974. However, no autopsy was permitted. So Shaw was dusted. He knew too much. Now we're going to define Francis Cardinal Spellman. Francis Joseph Spellman was born in 1889. He died in 1967. He was the 6th Archbishop of New York from 1939 to 1967. As Archbishop of New York, Spellman was in charge of the American chapter or the branch of the Knights of Malta. So we have the Supreme Commander of the Knights of Malta residing right there in New York City. And it says, according to author Eric John Phelps, a number of Knights of Malta were involved in the planning of the JFK assassination and in the cover-up of the conspiracy. Therefore, much of the blame for the assassination of JFK must be laid directly at Francis Cardinal Spellman's front doorstep. Now, the author is going to define Operation Zipper. Many of you have not heard of the Operation Zipper. Operation Zipper was the plan for the assassination of President Kennedy that originated out of the offices of several top CIA officials, for example, James Jesus Angleton and Robert T. Crowley. These two CIA officials kept John McCone, the CIA director, informed of their progress. Numerous conferences were held from March of 1963 through November of 1963. Other individuals were involved in the planning conferences under Operation Zipper, such as FBI Director William Sullivan, Chicago Mafia boss Sam Giancana, and two advisors to Vice President Johnson. A listing of these conferences can be found on pages 198 through 219 in the book entitled Regicide, The Official Assassination of John F. Kennedy by Gregory Douglas. So, how was John F. Kennedy assassinated? President John F. Kennedy was shot at 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, while traveling in a motorcade on Elm Street in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Clips of the famous Zapruder film, some of which can be seen in the movie JFK's Director's Cut by Oliver Stone, clearly show bullets striking JFK from at least 3 different directions. There were probably at least 3 shooters, and possibly as many as 5 or 6. When the Zapruder film was slowed down frame by frame, one can see that JFK is hit first from the front. This bullet entered his neck. Then, a few frames later, one sees JFK is hit in his back by a bullet, and this bullet propels him slightly forward. Then a few frames later, one can see John Connally being hit by a different bullet, and then a few frames later, one can see a bullet striking JFK in the front of his head. This fatal kill shot spins JFK's head violently back and to the left, blowing parts of his brain and skull out the rear of his head. Clearly, this was a well-planned and orchestrated professional hit that was carried out by a minimum of 3 shooters using triangulation. The Texas School Book Depository building in Dallas, Texas was behind JFK when he was hit by the fatal bullet that struck the front portion of his head. Thus, Lee Harvey Oswald was not the assassin of JFK. He did not fire the fatal shots that killed him. He was, like he claimed in front of the cameras, a patsy, a term used by the CIA when they try to put the blame on somebody else. Why was JFK assassinated? Darrell says, I personally believe that JFK was assassinated because, number one, JFK had in effect declared war on the powerful Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, Catholics in action. He had said and done a number of things that angered the upper echelons of the CIA. A, he caused the removal of CIA Director Alan Welsh Dulles and the U.S. Air Force General Charles P. Cabell, Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, from their positions of power at the CIA. B, he threatened on at least one occasion to break up the CIA. And C, he had made plans to transfer all CIA direct covert military operations from the CIA to the Pentagon. JFK believed strongly that the CIA's clandestine operations were totally out of control. Whose control were they in? Cardinal Spellman. And he said JFK clearly had made some very powerful enemies within the upper echelons of the CIA. And who were those powerful enemies at the upper echelons of the CIA? Knights of Malta. Number 2, JFK had ordered the Treasury Department to print up and put into circulation interest-free silver notes, paper money without the involvement of the privately owned Federal Reserve. In other words, he was trying to cut out the Pope's bankers. He was trying to put the economy back into the hands of Congress, the Treasury Department, as is required by the Constitution of the United States. He tried to repeal the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. He tried to cut out the Rothschilds, the bankers of the Vatican bankers. JFK went to war against every institution that was operated by the Vatican in this country. No doubt at some point in his administration he realized the Vatican was running this country and he wasn't going to stand for it. We'll continue with Darrell's newsletter when we get back to the break. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You'll have to apologize. I have to apologize to my listeners. A little bit of laryngitis this morning. I'm struggling through, but I'll make it. We're continuing with our reading and discussion of Daryl Eberhardt's newsletter about the Kennedy assassination, which you can download off of his website at toughissues.org. Print it and distribute it far and wide. Daryl is now discussing why was JFK assassinated. The second item in explaining the death of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, was that JFK ordered the Treasury Department to print up and put into circulation interest-free silver certificate paper money without the involvement of the privately owned, the Vatican-owned Federal Reserve Bank. This greatly angered the Jesuit-controlled international banksters, according to Daryl. And Robert Galen Ross Sr. on page 153 of his book entitled The Elite Serial Killers of Lincoln, JFK, RFK, and MLK, published in 2001, tells us, quote, JFK had issued Executive Order 11,110 on June 4th of 1963, instructing the Treasury Department to issue Treasury silver certificates in direct competition with the Pope's Federal Reserve System. The total amount of silver certificates issued was $4,292,893,825. Kennedy intended to repeal the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and return back to the Treasury Department the power and authority to create its own money and credit as stipulated in the United States Constitution, unquote. Author Craig Roberts, on page 189 of his book, Kill Zone, A Sniper Looks at Dealey Plaza, published in 1997, tells us, President John Kennedy planned to exterminate the Federal Reserve System, then put the country back on the gold standard, unquote. That's right. The Federal Reserve Bank is a Jesuit bank that prints our money, regulates the money supply, controls the economy through that system, indebts this country beyond its ability to pay, and then holds the gold of this country as security on the debt. The Vatican owns all the gold. and we're left holding the bag. The Federal Reserve bag. The Vatican bag. The Vatican is going to war against this country. And President Kennedy knew it. And President Kennedy, a Roman Catholic and a Knight of Columbus, defied his church, defied his Pope, defied the Vatican, and tried to overthrow the Federal Reserve Bank and place this nation's destiny back into the hands of the American people. And he was assassinated for it. Number 3, John F. Kennedy intended to bring the Vietnam War, a holy Roman crusade against the Buddhists of Vietnam, to a much faster conclusion than was desired by the powers that rule America from behind the scenes. Many powerful Americans and big corporations were making a whole lot of money on the Vietnam War. Some powerful folks were also making a lot of money from the narcotics trade that flowed from Southeast Asia. John F. Kennedy's plan for an early end to the Vietnam War angered powerful men in the military-industrial complex and at the CIA. These plans also angered the Jesuit-controlled international banksters. According to Eric John Phelps, many of these bankers were and still are Knights of Malta. Number 4, John F. Kennedy planned to bring the Cold War to a much faster conclusion than was desired by the powers that rule America from behind the scenes. This angered some of the very powerful men in the military-industrial complex and at the CIA. They believed JFK was soft on communism, they said. It also angered the Jesuit-controlled international banksters. Again, according to Eric John Phelps, many of these bankers were and still are Knights of Malta. Number 5, John F. Kennedy had shown disrespect, and this is key, had shown disrespect to the Roman Catholic hierarchy here in the United States by refusing to allow Cardinal Spellman to perform Mass at the White House, and by several statements he had made stressing his quote-unquote independence from the American Roman Catholic hierarchy. Additionally, John F. Kennedy angered the Vatican Papacy Jesuit Knights of Malta cabal when he, as author Eric John Phelps points out, withdrew the CIA advisor from Saigon and abandoned the Roman Catholic South Vietnamese dictator, President Ngo Dinh Diem. This is key. He was going to bring down the Diem regime, which in effect was Cardinal Spellman's regime, in charge of the Vatican Jesuit-led Holy Roman Crusade against the Buddhists in Vietnam. Ngo Dinh Diem, who was later executed by some South Vietnamese army generals. Francis Cardinal Spellman, then head of the American chapter of the Knights of Malta, had helped put Diem into power in South Vietnam. That's right. Cardinal Spellman helped put Ngo Dinh Diem, a Roman Catholic who once sought the priesthood of the Roman Catholic Church, put him in the presidential chair in South Vietnam. It was Diem who led the crusade against the Muslims. And it says, to the best of my knowledge, Eric John Phelps, author of the book Vatican Assassins Wounded in the House of My Friends, is the only writer who tells us that many high-level conspirators in the JFK assassination and subsequent cover-up were Knights of Malta. Number 6, JFK and his brother Bobby had angered the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church's mafia in the United States by going after powerful mafia bosses. Some of these mafia bosses were called before the Senate committees that were investigating organized crime in the United States. John and Bobby Kennedy had also angered the leadership of the mafia by going after Jimmy Hoffa, head of the Teamsters Union, a man who was deeply involved with the mob. Additionally, the mafia felt that JFK owed them for his presidency, since they believed mafia-controlled unions had helped to put the key states of Illinois and West Virginia into the win column for JFK during his presidential run. That's right. They went to war against the Pope's marketers and traffickers of vice in this country. Yes, if you want to make a Protestant nation crumble, simply take a Roman Catholic mob and distribute pornography, drugs, weapons, and every form of vice. And that's what the mafia is all about, to destroy this Protestant nation. John F. Kennedy went to war against the Pope's traffickers of vice, and they killed him for it. Number 7, JFK angered the Eastern establishment elite, including the top leaders of steel corporations and the international banksters, with his economic trade policies. He was doing an end run around international banking by dealing directly, country to country, with various nations in Latin America. JFK was making sure that Latin American nations got low-interest loans from the United States without having to go through the international banksters. JFK was making a direct assault on the one way of doing business with nations in Latin America and Africa, the old way of making poor nations producers only of raw products for the industrialized nations, while keeping those producing nations in perpetual debt to the Jesuit-controlled international bankers. Number 8, JFK angered big oil interests. Professor Donald Gibson, on page 107 of his book entitled Battling Wall Street, the Kennedy Presidency, published in 1994, tells us, quote, President Kennedy had repeatedly stressed the importance of creating an abundant and growing supply of cheap energy, unquote. He then adds the following on pages 107 and 108 of his book, quote, back in the 1870s, John D. Rockefeller Sr. had noted the advantages of producing, quote, less oil than the world required, unquote. In 1914, Standard Oil of New Jersey claimed that the United States had only 10 years oil supply left, and price increases followed. The agreement, and Darrell adds the quote, the Anacary Agreement of 1928, represented an attempt to stabilize the existing divisions of the world. Crude oil agreements was soon to, crude oil production. It says this agreement was soon to be publicly justified in terms of the need for conservation. While the effectiveness of the plan has been questioned, there's no doubt about the intentions. It was to maintain a relatively high price through artificial restrictions on supplies, thus capping the large oil strike off of the Gull Island in north of Alaska, which justified by the desirability of stability and the need for conservation. From 1930s to 1960s, the major oil companies, with varying degrees of success, undertook efforts to keep production down and prices up. This included the direct suppression of the Iraqi oil production and an arranged shortage in the United States in the 1945 to 1947 period in order to justify a more than 100% increase in crude oil prices. These and other efforts continued a pattern of activity stretching back to the monopolistic practices of Rockefeller Standard Oil Trust of the late 1800s. And Darrell adds the note, JFK was clearly a threat to those in big oil and the big steel production businesses who wanted to engage in price fixing, keeping prices artificially high through corporate cooperation. Number 9, JFK angered the powerful Roman Catholic Jesuit order when he and his brother Bobby Kennedy made plans for a coup scheduled for December 1st, 1963, to remove Jesuit-trained Cuban dictator Fidel Castro from power in Cuba. And Darrell adds a note, an important key to understanding the JFK assassination and subsequent cover-up is to realize that men in secret societies, such as the Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta and Jesuit-controlled high-level Freemasons control the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world. According to author Eric John Phelps, at least 7 directors of the Central Intelligence Agency, counting its predecessor, the OSS, have been Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. The decades-long head of the CIA counterintelligence was Knight of Malta James Jesus Angleton, who was the top CIA liaison man to the Warren Commission that investigated the Kennedy assassination. He also had close connections with the Mafia. Interestingly, Knights of Malta high-level Freemason Allen Dulles, who had been forced from his position of director of the CIA by John F. Kennedy, ended up being a member of the Warren Commission. Jesuit-controlled secret societies, the top levels of intelligence agencies, drugs, illegal narcotics trade, money laundering, gun smuggling, organized crime, international banking, and the Jesuit-controlled Vatican are closely intertwined. All roads lead to Rome. All fingers point at Rome. Did the Mafia leadership by themselves, or the Kremlin by itself, or Fidel Castro by himself have the capability to do all or even most of the following? And if none of them did, then who did? Number 1, to send Lee Harvey Oswald as an alleged defector to Russia and then bring him back to the United States with a Russian wife at the height of the Cold War. And to do this without any major problems? Number 2, to order the 112th Military Intelligence Group at Fort Sam Houston to stand down and not provide the extra security for JFK in Dallas on November 22, 1963, over the protests of the unit commander, Colonel Reich. Number 3, to select and get approval for a parade route of JFK's motorcade in Dallas on November 22, 1963, that violated the most basic security procedures, such as the bad turn that the motorcade had to make onto Elm Street. Number 4, to ensure that there was 1/3 of a combat division in the air on the day of the assassination for use in riot or crowd control in case something went wrong with the assassination. Number 5, to shut down the telephone system in Washington, D.C. for an hour on the day JFK assassination started at 12:34 p.m. Who had the power to do that? Number 6, to make sure the code books were not on board the aircraft carrying U.S. senators and U.S. congressmen to Japan for a meeting, thus ensuring that no critical messages concerning urgent national matters, such as a failed assassination attempt on the president, could be transmitted in code to that aircraft. Number 7, to have a transmit button depressed on one of the Dallas police motorcycle radios for the entire time of the ambush at Dealey Plaza, preventing any communications by the police should something have gone wrong during the assassination, or in case a policeman spotted one of the shooters. Number 8, to ensure that the Secret Service driver, William Greer, of the presidential limousine, slowed to almost a complete stop after hearing the first several shots, contrary to basic security procedures, in order to allow one of the shooters to accurately fire the final and fatal shot that struck the front portion of JFK's head. Number 9, to ensure that the dead president's body was quickly taken away from Dallas, Texas, before an autopsy could be performed by the local coroner in accordance with Texas law. Number 10, to order the altering of bullet wounds on the body of JFK to make entry wounds look like exit wounds, and to make exit wounds look like entry wounds. Number 11, to order the presidential limousine to be taken away and cleaned immediately after the assassination of President Kennedy, thus destroying important forensic evidence, such as bullet trajectories. Number 12, to appoint and control the members of the Warren Whitewash Commission. Number 13, to order the FBI to bug the office of New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison shortly after he started his major investigation of individuals who might have been involved in the conspiracy to assassinate JFK. Number 14, to order federal agencies such as the CIA, the FBI, the IRS to deny subpoenas for documents and or extradition of witnesses that had been requested by the office of New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison to aid in their investigation of individuals who might have been involved in the conspiracy to assassinate JFK. To cause the container of the remaining portions of JFK's brain tissue to disappear into thin air. And number 16, to order the establishment-controlled mainstream media to support some of the fantastic and ridiculous conclusions of the Warren Commission, such as there was no conspiracy, such as a lone nut assassin fired 3 super amazing shots from the Dallas School Book Depository building, and a magic bullet that did amazing feats. A note by Daryl Eberhardt. It is appropriate at this time to repeat that great quote from Jim Marrs. Quote, after all, every good detective begins his murder investigation by determining who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to commit the act. Unquote. To further your research into these matters, Daryl Eberhardt firstly suggests the 1,836-page electronic book entitled Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends, by researcher and author Eric John Phelps. This well-researched, profusely illustrated electronic book has a whole lot of information about the JFK assassination. It also has some very interesting information about the assassination of other heads of state over the centuries. To order it by credit card, please call 1-610-589-5300. Again, the phone number, 1-610-589-5300. Number 2, please purchase some of the following books, hopefully listed chronologically, says Daryl, by the most recent year of publication known to me that deal with the JFK assassination and or subsequent cover-up, or that deal with the number of some of the individuals who had inside information about the JFK assassination. Here are a list of these books. Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, published in 1989 by Jim Marrs, 625 pages. Double Cross, published in 1992 by Sam and Chuck Giancana, 495 pages. Kill Zone, A Sniper's Looks at Dealey Plaza, published 1994 and republished in 1997 by Craig Roberts, 252 pages. The Elite Serial Killers of Lincoln, JFK, RFK, and MLK, published in 2001 by Robert Galen Ross Sr., 337 pages. Regicide, The Official Assassination of John F. Kennedy, published in 2002 by Gregory Douglas, 223 pages. Without Smoking Gun, Was the Death of Lieutenant Colonel William B. Pitzer part of the JFK assassination cover-up conspiracy? Published in 2004 by Kent Heiner, 134 pages. Another book, Ultimate Sacrifice, John and Robert Kennedy, The Plan for a Coup in Cuba and the Murder of JFK, published in 2005 by Lamar Waldron and Tom Hartman, 904 pages. Dr. Mary's Monkey, How the Unsolved Murder of a Doctor, a Secret Laboratory in New Orleans, and cancer-causing monkey viruses are linked to Lee Harvey Oswald, the JFK assassination, and emerging global epidemics, published in 2007 by Edward T. Haslam, 374 pages. Also a book entitled Brothers, The Hidden History of the Kennedy Years, published in 2007 by David Talbot, 478 pages. Another book, The Secret Team, The CIA and Its Allies in Control of the United States and the World, published 1973 and republished in 2008 by L. Fletcher Prouty, 572 pages. JFK and the Unspeakable, Why He Died and Why It Matters, published in 2009 by James W. Douglas, 510 pages. Mary's Mosaic, the CIA Conspiracy to Murder John F. Kennedy, Mary Pinchot Meyer, and Their Vision for World Peace, published in 2012 by Peter Janney, 548 pages. And note from the author, to find copies of these books, please visit your local bookstore or do an internet search for them. And number 3, please watch the movie JFK Special Edition Director's Cut by Oliver Stone. Again, please make sure to rent or buy a copy of the Special Edition Director's Cut of JFK. And the final quote, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and good women to do nothing. Edmund Burke, 1729 to 1797. Edmund Burke was a British orator, author, and statesman. And Darrell says, let us all stand for the truth. What can you do? If you believe this handout contains important information that Americans need to know, then please make copies of it and pass those copies on to others. Please watch JFK Special Edition Director's Cut and share that with friends and family. Loan it out. And if you read any of the books recommended in the above, make sure that those books are read by others. Be a regular listener to Inquisition Update and First Amendment Radio, and check out Darrell Eberhardt's website at www.toughissues.org. Help spread the truth. The Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order has come to the United States of America, and it's time for God's people to know the truth and to abandon the ecumenical unity with Rome. I'll see you on Inquisition Update tomorrow on the broadcast.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.